What in the world did you do that made hell lose its grip and demons tremble in confusion? Let me tell you something that the enemy never saw coming. You made a holy move without warning. No noisy, no post, no announcement. And that silence, it was deadly to darkness. You shifted the bloodline. You broke a centuries-old curse. You rerouted an entire generational pattern, and you didn't tell a soul. That's what made the enemy panic. You didn't need validation. You didn't need witnesses. You moved in complete spiritual stealth, and that one act shattered every demonic plan that was banking on your obedience to fear. Heaven called it a silent strike. Hell called it a code red. You didn't repeat what wounded you. You didn't respond like they expected. You did something that hadn't been done in your bloodline for generations, and you did it while no one was looking. That's not a weakness. That's warfare. That's why the devil is shaking, because power wrapped in silence is the most dangerous kind. So let me ask you this. What else is God doing in you right now that's so sacred, so unstoppable that it must be protected by silence? If this word already hits your spirit like a divine alarm, comment 777 below to confirm your breakthrough is real. And from the depths of my heart, thank you to every single one of you who has supported this mission through Super. Thanks, your faith is not unseen, and your sacrifice is fueling something eternal. But listen, we're not done. What's about to unfold next will prove why your silence wasn't a weakness. It was spiritual sabotage against hell's entire agenda. Keep watching. What comes next will leave you speechless. God's chosen ones. The devil panicked because you did this without telling anyone. You walked away from what your past once called home, but heaven had already labeled it captivity the moment you stepped out without applause. Without a crowd cheering you on, realms shifted. A quiet yes in your soul became the catalyst for generational realignment. Most people think spiritual cycles are shattered through noise, but the kingdom doesn't operate on volume. It responds to frequency. And your frequency changed. What else in your life has been waiting for your internal yes before it can manifest outwardly? You didn't scream for deliverance. You simply aligned. And alignment, not performance, is what moves heaven. That trembling decision you made in private, perhaps while wiping away tears or questioning if it even mattered, was heard in the throne room. It pierced through spiritual legalities and cancelled contracts signed in your bloodline, but never in your spirit. Just like Esther, who risked everything with one silent step into the king's court. Your unseen obedience carried the authority of nations. Esther 4:14. And while it may not have looked like deliverance to others, heaven saw it as warfare. That emotional torment you had normalized, that cycle of guilt that replayed like background music in your soul, that wasn't discipline. It was a deception cloaked in religious shame. Romans 8:1 tells us, "There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." That voice accusing you daily was never heaven's voice. It was a generational echo, waiting for someone bold enough to say, "This ends with me." As you rejected the lie, perhaps silently, internally, stubbornly, the chain didn't just loosen, it snapped. That was the moment of divine expiration. You were never meant to carry shame that wasn't even yours. What systems are crumbling because you finally refused to bow to what once called itself normal when you realigned? The consequences rippled outward. The relationships that suddenly felt foreign, the invitations that stopped coming, the silence from those who once fed off your pain, None of it was random. You became like Moses in Hebrews 11:24-27, choosing to suffer for truth rather than be celebrated in falsehood. And in that decision, your spiritual authority activated. You didn't just change your future, you corrected your family's past. Your refusal to keep carrying what was never yours disarmed a throne of oppression that fed on your obedience. Isaiah 10:27 declares that the yoke shall be destroyed because of the anointing. You were the anointed one in your lineage. And the yoke? It didn't break in a loud deliverance room. It broke when you chose stillness over striving, truth over trauma, peace over punishment. What generational chains were never yours? Yet you carried them out of guilt, loyalty, or fear. There is a hidden architecture in the spirit, a design of divine blueprints. When you said yes to healing, you activated construction in the unseen. The architect of heaven began rebuilding what trauma once buried. The scaffolding of lies began to collapse. You thought you were just healing, but in truth, you were dismantling a stronghold built over centuries. And yet, while some watched in confusion, heaven knew exactly what you were doing. Just like the woman with the alabaster jar in Luke 7:37-38, uninvited, judged, and misunderstood you, broke the pattern. You poured out something costly. And though others questioned your method, Jesus called it beautiful. Those who mocked you have now gone quiet. Why? Because your transformation proved their narrative was hollow. They called you a problem, but your peace exposed their projection, and not everyone could handle that. And what if you've already broken them? Simply by choosing peace over performance. As a real-life reflection of this truth, let's recall Ernesto Ciroli, a development expert who once believed solutions came from giving poor communities outside help. But after witnessing consistent failure, he shifted entirely. He stopped speaking for people and started listening. You never help someone by doing for them what they can do for themselves. He said, your story mirrors that shift. You stopped fighting everyone's spiritual battles and began honoring your own process. And that's when everything began to work. By contrast, look at Frank Abagnale, a gifted con artist who faked identities, careers, and trust across nations. At first, his intelligence seemed impressive, but in time, his house of lies caught up. He spent years in prison, his legacy reduced to cautionary tales. No matter how charismatic the lie, truth always has the final say. His downfall proves this. Anything built on deception eventually collapses under its own illusion. You, on the other hand, built in stillness. You realigned without performance. You became dangerous, not because you were loud, but because you were true. You didn't walk away empty-handed. You walked away crowned. And now, God is handing you the pen to write a legacy of freedom. No more chains. No more silence. No more guilt for what you've outgrown. The old script expired the moment you aligned. Rise now. Chosen one. This is your permission slip to walk into freedom with no apologies. Here's the part no one dares to tell you. There are ancient spiritual patterns that outlive generations, cycles so subtle, so familiar, that most people live under them without even knowing they exist. They operate like invisible weather systems, pulling entire families into storms they never caused. And heaven, in its divine wisdom, often lets them run their course, unless someone stands still long enough to break them. Not with force, not with perfection, but with purity. What if you were the one your entire bloodline had been waiting for someone pure enough to interrupt the cycle with stillness instead of spite? And that's exactly what happened. Maybe it wasn't even a dramatic moment. Maybe it looked like nothing to everyone else. A pause, a sigh, a closed mouth when you could have cursed, a step back when your pride wanted to lunge forward. But in the spirit realm, that tiny act became a tectonic shift. God saw what others missed. Heaven recorded what earth ignored. You didn't post about it. You didn't perform it. But heaven watched you choose love over ego, silence over revenge, healthy boundaries over toxic loops. And that was the moment the pattern cracked. The entire system designed to bait you into another cycle short-circuited because your response no longer matched the blueprint. What if one holy hesitation carries more spiritual weight than 1,000 shouted victories? That single pause sent a shockwave through the realm of the spirit. It was as if you broke an echo that had been bouncing across your family line for decades. You didn't just say no to the drama, you reset the frequency. And when frequencies shift, atmospheres obey. Just as in the story of Jesus in the wilderness, Luke 4:1-13, you were tested by voices, offering you quick power and ego victories, but instead of feeding your flesh, you answered with stillness. You endured what most people escape, and in that wilderness of decision, you came out not just alive, but anointed. Jesus left the desert in the power of the Spirit. And so did you. Could it be that your silence wasn't weakness, but a trumpet call to heaven that you were ready for more? Romans 12:21 says, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." That's not just a principle, it's a prophecy. Your quiet goodness overcame a system that had overcome others before you. Your refusal to stoop became your spiritual rising. Nature understands this type of victory. The glacier, slow, silent, but powerful enough to carve valleys and reshape continents. It doesn't rush, it doesn't retaliate, but its stillness has authority. That's what you became, a spiritual glacier, an unstoppable force wrapped in holy stillness. What if your pause, your restraint, was the very proof that God could now trust you with power that wouldn't poison your purpose? And here's where everything changed. God, who honors alignment over appearance, interrupted the script. The next chapter of your life was scheduled to unfold a certain way, but heaven tore the page out because your internal decision rewrote the outcome. You were no longer reacting from wounds. You were responding from wholeness, and that signal pierced the atmosphere. This one is ready not for survival, but for spiritual authority. As it is written in Psalm 75:6-7, promotion comes neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south, but God is the judge. He puts down one and sets up another, and this was your promotion, but not the kind that's seen first in titles or platforms. This was the invisible coronation, the kind where God gives you dominion over yourself, your mind, your lineage. The skies shifted for you because heaven knew your soul had shifted. In cinema, we're reminded of how sacred restraint can change everything. In the 1996 European Christian film La Voix est libre, The Way is Clear, a former radical chooses peace over vengeance, telling a young boy, "There are wars we win by refusing to fight them." That line wasn't just poetic, it was prophetic. And in your case, it was fulfilled. Luke 16:10 says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much." And now, the way you handled the little, the unspoken, the unseen, the emotional trigger no one knew you endured, has marked you as trustworthy for more. You didn't break the cycle with fire. You broke it with stillness. You didn't prove yourself to people. You proved your alignment to God. Heaven saw it. Heaven recorded it. And now, heaven is rewarding it. This was the moment the system bent to your spirit. The script changed. And the next scene belongs to you, chosen one. Rise. You've graduated from defense to dominion. It wasn't just about your freedom. It was about becoming the threshold, an unlocked portal for those after you. You didn't just survive a storm, you rewrote the forecast for your bloodline. You altered the gravitational pull in the spirit, resetting the orbit of future generations. That's why the warfare felt generational. Because it was. What if your endurance wasn't just proof you could carry pain, but confirmation that you could carry legacy? This is the kind of divine shift that doesn't just reward you with comfort, it expands your access. Access to wisdom, to peace, to prophetic discernment. You didn't just change what you receive, you changed what can be received through you. Like a spiritual aqueduct, your obedience now carries living water to those who've never tasted freedom. And here's the revelation. There were spiritual systems in place. Not punishments, but patterns, not cruelty, but cosmic calibration. God operates through divine architecture, spiritual laws, sacred geometry, and resonant timing. These laws aren't made of stone, they're made of alignment. They move like fluid dynamics in a closed system, unchanged, until external force or internal intention disrupts the flow. You became that disruption. You did something different. When everything in your nervous system screamed to retaliate, you breathed. When generational pressure begged you to conform, you exhaled alignment instead. And that breath, that silent surrender, sent shockwaves through the frequency spectrum of your lineage. It's what physicists call a phase shift. A small change in condition creates a completely new state of matter. You didn't just change actions, you changed state. Could it be that your restraint wasn't suppression, but sacred engineering constructing a new spiritual structure under pressure? That's why heaven responded. God saw not just what you endured, but how you responded. He saw the moment you didn't numb out, the moment you didn't weaponize your trauma, the moment you chose clarity over chaos. And that was the moment he whispered, "Make an exception. Start the blessing early." IP, not favoritism, but divine trust. You weren't chosen because you were flawless. You were chosen because you were available. You were aware enough to stay tender in a brutal season, and that kind of awareness is rare. Isaías 66. Dos declares. These are the ones I look on with favor, those who are humble and contrite in spirit, and who tremble at my word. You trembled. Yes, but you didn't tremble away. You trembled toward. You didn't build walls. You became a gate. You didn't numb. You noticed. You didn't escape into ego. You entered into empathy. And heaven promoted you, not because you were louder, but because you were emptier, ready, soft, available. Vessels don't carry power because they're solid. They carry it because they're hollowed. This is the unseen principle of spiritual authority. God promotes those who won't use pain as a platform to dominate, but as a map to deliver. To illuminate this, the life of Rafael Iglesias, an American novelist and screenwriter who once said, "Pain doesn't make you deep, compassion does." But pain is the tool that carves the space for compassion to live. His writing explores the fragility of the human soul, the same fragility you faced and refused to exploit. Like a chess grandmaster holding a winning move but choosing to wait. You displayed spiritual game theory, sacrificing immediate satisfaction for eternal advantage. You played the long game, the kingdom game. And the result? God changed the rulebook. A new leader has risen in the bloodline. A new gate has opened in your name. And those who come after you will walk in easier because you made it harder for yourself for their sake. Galatians 6:9 reminds us, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Your time is not just coming, it has begun. Quietly, gloriously, you thought you were surviving. But heaven saw you as a building. You were laying foundations in silence, brick by invisible brick, until suddenly a house of freedom stood where trauma used to reign. You didn't just survive the pattern, you became the interruption, the leader, the new structure. And now, the heavens are echoing with one word: access granted. Well, chosen one. Rise. The door you opened wasn't just for you, it was for 1,000 more. You held the line when no one clapped, when no one noticed, when your hands trembled with restraint, when your heart burned with the urge to retaliate. But you didn't. You said nothing and did everything. Heaven took note, while earth stayed silent. And now, because of what you did in the dark, heaven is dismantling the systems that once delayed you in the light. Your secret sacrifice is now becoming the public shift. The tables are turning because you chose not to flip them. You've proven that spiritual authority isn't built through applause, but through private alignment. And for that, heaven has reordered everything around you. Have you ever wondered if your obedience in isolation carried the power to rearrange bloodline outcomes? The patterns that used to drag you back, those emotional undercurrents that made you repeat what you swore you'd never become, they're losing power now. Not because they disappeared, but because you did. You disappeared from the spiritual grid that once hosted them. You're not in the same place anymore. You're not under it. You're above it. That elevation isn't arrogance, it's evidence. Evidence that heaven has lifted you above the frequency of the curse. You're walking in a new altitude, where the old chains can't breathe. And when the air shifts, the spirit world knows it before you do. Ephesians 2:6. And God raised us up with Christ and seated us with him in the heavenly realms. That's not a metaphor. That's your legal position now. And it all began the moment you chose not to repeat what tried to repeat through you. You became a spiritual anomaly, unexplainable by generational logic. The bloodline recognized it. That's why you were attacked so heavily. The war wasn't about you, it was about your exit. What if your refusal to mimic your pain became the weapon heaven used to break ancestral agreements? Let that settle into your bones. The things your parents wept over in private but could never break. The chains your grandparents accepted as normal. The ache you inherited but couldn't name. They were waiting, not for a savior, but for a decision. Someone to quietly live a new script. Someone who didn't need a platform to prove they were healed, only a life. And that life? It's yours. Your healing is now their inheritance. Your silence was never a weakness. It was a prophecy wrapped in restraint. Romans 12:2 calls us not to conform to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. You didn't just renew your mind, you reprogrammed the atmosphere for everyone coming after you. You became the hinge on which the door turned, the axis where the bloodline bent and a new chapter began. This is legacy in motion, an unrecorded miracle now rewriting generational memory. You didn't say, "It ends here," with a shout. You said it with your walk, with your boundaries, with your refusal to retaliate. You stopped the echo by becoming silent. You broke the cycle by refusing to mirror the one who broke you. Your life is not repeating, it's rebuilding. And every step forward is a burial service for the pattern that once claimed your name. What if generational healing doesn't always start with loud prayers, but with quiet choices in private rooms? To reinforce this, the life of British humanitarian Terry Waite, who spent years in solitary confinement while negotiating the release of hostages in Lebanon, tortured, isolated, and forgotten. He emerged, not with vengeance, but peace. He once said, "When you forgive, you set a prisoner free. And then you discover the prisoner was you." That kind of restraint isn't a weakness, it's transformation. What he unlocked in chains, you've unlocked in spirit. You both endured darkness, but refused to become it. And that's what heaven calls leadership. Now, in contrast, history offers cautionary tales. Leopold II of Belgium, a monarch who publicly claimed philanthropy but privately orchestrated brutal colonial exploitation in the Congo. His reign cost millions of lives. Yet for years he was celebrated in Europe as a civilizer. Eventually, truth shattered his legacy. Statues fell. History corrected itself. The consequence? He became a global symbol of moral decay, masquerading as benevolence. His legacy is no longer powerful. It's a shame. The world may reward performance for a time, but heaven always remembers posture. A legacy built on blood will rot. Legacy built on truth will rise. This contrast proves something. The way we handle power, especially power over pain, shapes not only our future, but how history remembers us. Could your quiet decision today become the safety someone else stands on tomorrow? Isaiah 61:4. They will rebuild the ancient ruins and restore the places long devastated. They will renew the ruined cities. That's not a call for buildings. That's a call for bloodlines. And you, chosen one, have picked up the spiritual tools and said, "I will rebuild what they could only survive." So, you weren't just the survivor. You were the rebuilder. You carried bricks of faith where others carried wounds. And now the structure stands. You didn't become what hurt you. And that alone shattered what they said couldn't be broken. 2 Corinthians 10:4 affirms, "The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds." You wielded those weapons not in a battlefield, but in your bedroom, in your boundaries, in your restraint. That was your war, and you won. But here's the part they don't understand. You didn't just win for yourself, you won for everyone connected to your name. This is how bloodline redemption begins. Quiet, steady, holy. You didn't need to scream to break the cycle. You just needed to not become what broke you. And now, what once ran in your blood ends with you. The delay has been reversed. The repetition has no more access. The echo has been silenced. And in its place, clarity has risen. You were the interruption. You were the one. And heaven has honored your walk with a new path. Chosen one. Rise. Because now the silence is speaking. For you, you walked away from something old. Something that was once familiar, even comfortable in its dysfunction. You didn't just leave a habit, you exited a system. And in doing so, you stepped into a covenant that's been waiting for generations. One not forged in pain, but in prophecy, not built through inheritance, but activated by obedience. Have you noticed how your footsteps feel louder in this new space? Even though no one else hears them. That's because you're not walking on common ground. You've stepped into territory your ancestors only prayed to glimpse. Their tears softened this soil. Their cries cracked the ceiling. But it's you who now walks it. And as strange as it seems, this isn't foreign. It's sacred. There's no map here. No footsteps to trace. You're pioneering something that has no earthly manual, and that's why it feels quiet. Not empty, just uncharted, because the old noise of fear, shame, Approval seeking has faded. You're finally breathing the oxygen of freedom. It's unfamiliar because it's clean. Joshua 1:3 says, "Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you." That promise wasn't metaphorical, it's architectural. As you move forward, spiritual structures are rising beneath you. You don't see the foundation yet, but the kingdom does. And it's responding. Could it be that your confusion is proof you're in a place no one around you was ever equipped to describe? This isn't the kind of elevation that announces itself with noise. This is the kind that comes with stillness, sacred stillness. The kind that says, "This doesn't look like a breakthrough, but it feels like rest." You're not running anymore. You're walking with the weight of new responsibility, like mist after rainfall. This next season arrives, soft but heavy, and Isaiah 43:19 whispers, "See, I am doing a new thing, now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" Your perception might not have caught up to your spirit yet, but the earth beneath you already knows. The air already feels different. Your presence is shifting atmospheres, whether you understand it or not. What if this silence is not emptiness, but holy insulation protecting what's just begun to form? Nature itself confirms it. When a snake sheds its skin, it doesn't roar, it retreats. The transformation is not dramatic. It's slow, quiet, and necessary. And in that stillness, something ancient is left behind while something divine takes shape. You're shedding a past identity without knowing the full image of the new one yet, but the process is holy. The shedding is sacred. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness isn't stagnation, it's a strategy. God is reorienting your spirit before he reintroduces you to the world. What if you're not lost? You're just in transit between who you were and who heaven says you are. This is the in-between, the cocoon, the slow turning of seasons before the buds bloom. And the quiet, it's not punishment, it's preservation. Heaven silenced the external noise, so your internal frequency could recalibrate. You are not in hiding, you are hallowing. Cinema has glimpsed this holy paradox. In the 2011 French Christian film Des Hommes et des Dieux, of Gods and Men, a monk facing death in Algeria says quietly, "I am not afraid of death. I am afraid of the unknown joy that awaits me on the other side." That kind of peace doesn't come from explanations, it comes from revelation. And you, chosen one, are walking through that threshold now. Romans 8:18 promise. The sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that will be revealed in us. You've been through enough fire. Now comes the forming. You're being shaped for glory, not just relief. And the beautiful tension is this: you're still tired. You're still wondering, was that even a big deal? Because trauma never lets you celebrate too soon. But grace knows when the shift already happened. Could it be that the battle is over? Even if your emotions haven't caught up yet, because whether you feel it or not, the atmosphere around you has already changed. You carry a different charge now. Environments submitted, patterns loosen, the heavens record, and the enemy retreats not because you roared, but because you walked differently. This isn't confusing. This is construction. This isn't a delay. This is divine disorientation before the reveal. You're not going back. You're not stuck. You're not lost. You're in the space where new systems are born and old ones fall away. Chosen one, rise. The stillness around you is not silence. It is sacred applause. The people who once triggered you now feel distant, not just geographically, but spiritually, like their emotional tether to your soul has finally snapped without ceremony. And the most surprising part? You didn't even realize it had broken until they tried the same manipulative dance, and nothing in you responded. No emotional charge. No need to defend. No unraveling spiral of overthinking. Just stillness. What once sent you into hours of mental noise now echoes into a space that simply doesn't receive it anymore. It's not that you blocked them out, it's that you've grown beyond the frequency where their chaos can land. Their words are the same. But your nervous system doesn't flinch. That's not numbness. That's sovereignty. You used to spiral at the first sign of misunderstanding. Now, you pose. You used to explain yourself until your throat ached with invisible desperation. Now, your silence says everything. You used to brace for conflict, rehearsing rebuttals in your head before a word was even said. Now, you walk away before the fight even begins. And no, that's not apathy. That's mastery. Not the kind taught on stages or applauded by the crowd, but the kind that is born in the sacred trenches of self-regulation and spiritual discipline. Proverbs 27 says, "The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint. And whoever has understanding is even-tempered." You've become even-tempered not because life got quieter, but because you finally stopped giving your energy to what can't grow with you. The storm still rages. But now you're in the eye of it. You're not just surviving, you're seated. You've entered the atmosphere of spiritual maturity, where triggers dissolve not because they disappeared, but because you no longer feed them. Could it be that your detachment isn't abandonment, but divine insulation from the places you've outgrown? The change didn't come with fireworks. It came with micro-decisions. You recalibrated in silence. You healed in unseen places. And heaven responded not to your noise, but to your nervous system's surrender. Picture it like this: a hallway in your soul lined with doors. Each one leads to an old identity: people-pleasing, needing to be liked, over-explaining, shrinking, or performing. You used to walk into those rooms daily, unaware. But now you just walk past them. You see the handles, but your hand doesn't reach anymore. The hallway hasn't changed, but the inhabitant has. Romans 6:14 says, "For sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not under the law, but under grace." That includes emotional slavery too. You're not pacing anymore. You're walking on purpose. You no longer enter the doors that dishonor your peace. You pass by them, steady and unshaken. Because you know that explaining yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you is spiritual leakage. The hallway of your soul has been remodeled. You didn't just shut the doors. You took the keys back. What if spiritual maturity isn't avoiding temptation, but outgrowing the need to dignify it? The shift, though invisible on the outside, is structural within. In architectural terms, you've undergone a retrofit, not superficial paint or decoration, but load-bearing reconstruction. You've become earthquake-resistant. The triggers are still there, but the foundation beneath you no longer shakes. That's not luck. That's engineering. 2 Timothy 1:17 reminds us, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." And that sound mind, that's the real breakthrough. You didn't earn it in a revival room. You forged it in text messages left unread, in arguments never engaged, in energy you refused to waste. And that's what makes this transformation sacred. It happened in ordinary moments, away from applause, rooted in private choices that no one will ever fully understand but God. You didn't broadcast your change, you embodied it. And heaven doesn't need to see the video reel. I already wrote the testimony. Could it be that you're not walking away from people, but walking toward peace that can no longer afford to be compromised? That you're not escaping, you're ascending? To grasp the weight of this, Sister Nathalie Becquois, a French nun and the first woman in history granted voting rights in the Vatican Synod, when asked about her resistance in a male-dominated hierarchy, she replied quietly, "Silence can be a prophetic act, sometimes. What we refuse to say becomes more powerful than what we speak." That's your life now, not reactive, prophetic. Your restraint isn't fear, it's force. It's the sound of a soul that no longer needs to explain what God has already confirmed. It's the posture of someone who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. Isaiah 30:15 says, "In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength." And now, in that quietness, you're becoming stronger than you've ever been. You're no longer performing, you're presiding, not from a throne of pride, but from a seat of peace. You're not avoiding, you're discerning. You're not hiding, you're being hidden. You've become the silence the enemy can't decode, the stillness that speaks louder than confrontation ever could. And you carry a presence now that words can't match. This is your confirmation. The hallway is no longer full of triggers, it's lined with locked doors. And you hold the only key. And if you're wondering what all this inner transformation means in the spirit, hear this. It means heaven is trusting you with power that doesn't shout. It means you are not who you were, not emotionally, not spiritually, not structurally. You have become what others only prayed for the strength to imagine. And now the atmosphere knows it. The enemy knows it. Heaven knows it. And soon, everyone else will see it too. Chosen one. Rise. You've outgrown what was never meant to master you. The palace is ready for your footsteps. And this time, you'll walk it without explaining a thing. For years, you walked down a hallway within yourself lined with doors you never chose but felt obligated to enter. Some of them were inherited. Others were learned. And a few were pressed upon you so early that you didn't even realize you had the option to say no. One door whispered self-doubt every time you tried to shine. Another screamed emotional debt, telling you that you owed everyone more of yourself than you actually had to give. Still, another was painted with invisible ink that read, "Never enough." A room where no matter how much you gave, it was always met with lack. Silence. Or dismissal. These weren't doors you opened because you loved what was inside. You opened them because the pattern said you had to. Because the people before you walked through them too. Because the narrative in your lineage taught you to survive rooms that were never meant to hold your name. But what if survival was never the goal? What if you were sent to question the architecture itself? But then something radical happened. You made a move no one saw. You shifted not in rebellion, but in obedience. You paused when everything screamed. You healed when you had every right to hurt. You stayed soft in the hands of fire. And that decision, silent, sacred, unnoticed by many, began to change the structure of the hallway itself. The old doors didn't slam shut. They began to dissolve. What used to be your only options have now faded like breath on glass. Because you didn't just break a cycle, you rewrote the corridor. Hebrews 10:20 calls Jesus the new and living way. And through him, you've stepped into a path no one else in your bloodline dared to take. And now, ahead of you, there's a door with your name on it. Not a recycled promise, not a generic breakthrough. This door doesn't say answered prayer or new level. It says first of its kind, because that's who you are now. The first in your lineage to respond this way. The first to feel the pain and not pass it on. The first to walk through the fire and keep your soul from turning bitter. The first to grieve deeply without drowning. The first to stop performing and finally be still. Isaiah 43:19 reminds us, "Behold, I am doing a new thing, now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? And you, chosen one, you are the new thing." What if the inheritance you were always waiting for wasn't wealth, but wisdom, a wisdom that doesn't shout in public, but whispers in the way you walk differently through private spaces? You're not just entering into something new, you're becoming someone new. And sometimes that newness feels lonely, not because you're lost, but because you're leading. To show how powerful this shift is, a real-life example, acclaimed visual artist Njideka Akunuli Crosby, a Nigerian-American painter who blends African and Western techniques in her layered works. When asked about carrying two cultures in her work, she said, "I embrace the multiplicity within me, even if it doesn't fit the template of what people expect. Like you." She didn't shrink to fit the mold. She created something entirely new. And now, her art hangs in the Smithsonian. Her choice to embrace the complexity of her inheritance without apology mirrors what you're doing spiritually. You are not rejecting where you came from. You're just refusing to stay trapped inside it. 1 Corinthians 15:22 says, "For as in Adam all die, so also in Christ shall all be made alive." You are no longer under Adam's default pattern. You've chosen Christ's covenant blueprint. And with that choice, you became the interruption that your bloodline has been crying out for. Your obedience is now an architectural act, one that heaven is using to build a completely different future. Could it be that you weren't just delivered for yourself, but also as a doorway for those behind you who still don't know how to come out? Now, in contrast, history has also shown us what happens when people cling to old patterns at any cost. Charles Taylor, former president of Liberia, once seen as a promising leader, he chose to preserve power through brutality, fueling a civil war that cost over 250,000 lives. What began as political ambition turned into demonic tyranny. In the end, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison by an international court. His refusal to surrender the system not only destroyed his legacy, it destroyed generations. That's the cost of keeping old doors open when heaven is trying to build something new. Deuteronomy 30:19 says, "I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live." That choice was never meant to be loud. It was meant to be lasting. And you've made it. You've chosen life. Not just for you, but for those who come after you. Your children won't walk into those same rooms. Your spiritual descendants won't have to pick up the pieces you never dropped. And even now, something in the atmosphere is bearing witness that a new blueprint has begun to take form. What if the door you just opened is the very door someone else has been praying would exist? This is the moment when legacy changes direction. This is the hour where heaven says, "Well done," not because you conquered others, but because you conquered what tried to conquer you. Romans 8:13 declares, "In all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us." That more than is what you've become. Not just a survivor, not just a breaker. You are a builder of a brand new legacy. You've stood where others collapsed. You've forgiven where others avenged. You've walked away without bitterness, and that alone rewrote history. You are not just healed, you are holy ground. You are not just free, you are the freedom others will walk into. You didn't just survive what was meant to stop you, you made it obsolete. And now, The door, with your name on it, is not waiting. It is open, chosen one. Rise. You are the first of your kind, and heaven has made room for your arrival. You were the first to say no to the familiar chaos. The first to stop bowing to dysfunction, disguised as tradition. The first to resist the temptation to repeat what wounded you, just because it felt known. And even more bravely, you were the first to say yes to a peace no one ever modeled for you. A peace that didn't come with instructions. Applause. Or affirmation. You carved it out of silence. You stitched it together from fragments of prayer and intuition. There was no one behind you clapping. No voice reassuring you. You're doing it right. Just the sound of your own breathing. Steadying in an atmosphere where you used to hold your breath. And yet, heaven was not quiet. While earth gave you crickets, heaven thundered, not with noise, but with movement. There's a kind of thunder that doesn't crack through skies. It rumbles beneath the surface of everything. That's what's been happening for you. God saw it, not just what happened to you, but how you responded. Not the betrayal, but the restraint. Not injustice, but integrity. Matthew 6-4 reminds us, "Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you." And now, that reward is not coming in the form of fanfare, but recognition. Because what you did wasn't about performance, it was about blueprint. Could it be that your silence was never a weakness but a signal to heaven that you were ready for the real assignment? When you could have clapped back, you healed. When you could have cursed them, you prayed. When you could have torn it all down, you built in quiet. That's not ordinary maturity. That's spiritual architecture. Every act of restraint, every uncelebrated choice to hold your peace. Every time you extended grace without a scoreboard, it all became structured in the unseen. 1 Peter 2-5 says, "You also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house." You didn't just stop the old, you birthed the new, not in lightning, but in layering, in choosing to walk a different path even when the trail was invisible. What if every time you chose stillness over reaction, heaven recorded it as construction? You've been laying invisible bricks, and now the structure is rising. Not a tower of ego, but a house of glory. The foundation being poured isn't favor for favor's sake. It's structural, permanent, weight-bearing. Because what you're about to carry requires more than a moment. It requires a framework that only restraint can produce. Salm 127, 1 declares, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain." But you didn't labor in vain. You labored in love, in silence, in reverence, and now heaven is building with you. This is what God meant when he said, "Shift the pattern." You thought you were just surviving the betrayal, but you were flipping the spiritual code. You were breaking an old rhythm and installing a new frequency. Every time you loved without needing to return, every time you let go of being understood, every time you chosen dignity over dominance, it was never just character development, it was kingdom transmission. Like the palm tree that bends but doesn't break in the storm, you become flexible enough to withstand what others snapped under. That's why you're still here. That's why the wind didn't take you out. Isaiah 61:3 says, "He gives you a crown of beauty instead of ashes." You traded the ashes of your past for the architecture of your future, quietly, boldly, faithfully. Could it be that the reason everything feels heavier right now is because the foundation is setting in film? This paradox of quiet authority is captured in the 2007 French Christian film La Passion d'Augustine. A nun fights to keep her sacred music school alive amid rising government secularism. At one moment, she whispers to a student, "We do not preserve tradition by resisting change, but by building something new in its spirit." That line echoes what God is doing through you. You didn't preserve the old pain. You protected its root and grew something holy instead. Now, heaven isn't sending you applause. Heaven is sending an assignment, and not just favor foundation. Favor can come in a flash. Foundation lasts through storms. And you didn't just break a curse. You built a covenant, one unshakable in time, tested in silence, and rooted in what cannot be bought. Isaías 58:12 declares, "You will be called the repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings." You're not just healed, you are healing space. The architecture you carry is not visible to many, but it is functional in the spirit. Walls are rising where ruins once mocked you. What if legacy isn't what you leave behind, but what you build that others live within? Long after you're gone, heaven has seen the house you built in silence. Every small yes you offered in the face of chaos became sacred scaffolding. And now, the blueprint you carried in your belly is becoming a structure others can stand in. This isn't just restoration, it's a revelation. You didn't just protect your peace, you created spiritual property. And now, God is saying, welcome to your foundation. Step in and rise. Chosen one, this is not just favor, it's inheritance. Walk boldly. The house is ready. You've become a spiritual landscape, a living terrain shaped not just by your decisions, but by your resistance, your resilience, and your radical compassion. Others will now walk through territory freely that you paid for with silence, endurance, and obedience. This isn't a metaphor, it's infrastructure. There are dimensions that have opened not through might, but through mercy. You paved a road through the unseen and unknowable, not with shouts or weapons, but with surrender. And now, your life is echoing in realms you cannot see, not as noisy, as permission. Permission for others to choose differently. Permission to believe healing is possible. Permission to live without shame. Could it be that your obedience created resonance in the spirit, amplifying frequencies that trauma once tried to mute? You've become the living interruption in a generational broadcast of fear, and your very being now tells a story louder than your words. You're not just a survivor, you're the evidence that the cycle could stop without screaming, that love could rewrite anger, that inner peace could become a louder witness than generational pain. Romans 12:21 reminds us, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And you did exactly that without needing applause, vengeance, or validation. Now, the shift that began in spirit is breaking into the physical realm. It's not a theory anymore. It's activation. Spiritual gravity has changed. Things are now being pulled into your life that used to feel out of reach. Opportunities will arrive that seem random, but they're not. They are gravitational responses to your new spiritual mass. In physics, when a celestial body increases in density, its gravitational pull intensifies, drawing objects to it without effort. That's what's happening now. Your spirit became heavier with clarity. So now, blessing is orbiting you. Isaías 60:11 declares, your gates will always stand open, so that people may bring you the wealth of the nations. This isn't prosperity for vanity. It's access with purpose. Certain doors are opening because your name now carries new clearance. Your spirit has been upgraded in heaven's system. You're no longer flagged by fear, you're cleared by fire. And everything that once resisted you is now responding to you. What if the delays you once cursed were simply heaven's way of waiting for you to grow into your own authority? What used to feel like withholding was actually calibrating. The opportunities weren't denied, they were delayed until you could handle the weight of what they carried. In acoustics, there's a phenomenon called resonant delay, where a sound only amplifies after it aligns perfectly with the space it's in. The frequency was always present, but amplification had to wait. You were that waiting space. And now, the sound has landed. The favor is flowing. Psalm 84:11 says, "No good thing does he withhold from those whose walk is blameless." And your walk, chosen one, has become blameless, not because it was perfect, but because it was positioned. This is what it looks like when heaven writes a new story through a willing vessel. Not just permission, but presence. You are now walking in a level of divine clarity that doesn't need confirmation. The patterns that once repeated like ancient scripts have become past tense. They are no longer activated because you are no longer agreeing with them. The enemy lost the echo when you stopped responding. What used to be your survival mode has become your testimony. What if your life is now functioning as an open portal, releasing new atmospheric codes into the lives of those who simply watch you walk? To understand this weight, the story of Jesmyn Ward, an American novelist and two-time National Book Award winner. Her writing confronts generational trauma, loss, and resilience in the Black American South. When asked how she keeps writing through grief, she said, "If I didn't write, I wouldn't know what to do with all this feeling." Her words created landscapes for readers to mourn, reflect, and heal. And so have yours, not with ink, but with action. Your life has become a manuscript written in spirit. 2 Corinthians 3:3 tells us, "You are a letter from Christ, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God." That's you. A letter, a living permission slip, a message that says, freedom is possible, and here's the proof. What if you're no longer waiting for the next chapter because you've already become it? The delay is over. The spiritual air is shifting in your favor. Doors that were locked due to old alignment are now opening in response to who you've become. What once withheld is now being released. Not just favor, but foundation. Not just blessings, but blueprints. Chosen one. Walk with confidence. You are no longer a pattern, you are a path. The world will walk through what you built in secret, and heaven has made it permanent. So if your world feels quieter right now, if the silence around you feels stretched, unfamiliar, and sacred, don't panic. You're not lost. You're not off course. You're not in the wrong place. You're in a holy reconstruction. When your life begins to change spiritually, the environment around you always lags behind. What feels like stillness is actually spiritual scaffolding. You're not disoriented. You're being repatterned. The old grip has been broken. The default responses have weakened. The trauma-based reactions don't have the same hold they once did. And your new peace might feel strange because it's not attached to external validation. But make no mistake, this is what freedom feels like when you've never felt it before. You've walked out of the familiar cage, and for the first time, the echo is gone. The old triggers are starving. The cycle no longer recognizes you. 2 Corinthians 5:17 declares, "If anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone. The new is here." Could it be that the quiet you feel is not absence, but the presence of something unshakable finally settling in? This path you're on may look unlike anything you've ever seen. There is no crowd on this road. There is no applause, no clear blueprint. But that's because you are the first to walk it, the first to break the mold, the first to say, no more, and mean it. And what began as a whisper inside your spirit became a command in heaven. Let's build the future on this kind of obedience. Isaiah 43:18-19 reminds us, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? What's unfolding through you is not just a better version of what was. It's something completely new, something divine. And the magnitude of this moment reaches far beyond your personal blessing. You didn't just make a choice for you, you made a shift for generations. What if your forward movement in silence was heaven's signal that the generational curse had expired? This is why certain doors are opening now. Not because you earned it with noise, but because you proved trustworthy in quiet. Because you forgave when no one said sorry. Because you rebuilt where others abandoned. Because you listened to the whisper of the Spirit instead of the shouts of your emotions. Romans 2:6 reminds us. God will repay each person according to what they have done. And heaven saw what no one clapped for. To ground this, consider the story of Marina Abramovich, a performance artist known for turning endurance and stillness into acts of spiritual power. In her famous work, The Artist is Present, she sat silently for 736 hours, offering herself to be seen but not to react. When asked why she chose silence, she said, "When you perform without moving, people see themselves. That's what your restraint has done." It became a mirror, a pattern breaker, a holy act of stillness that spoke louder than any performance ever could. And by contrast, let's not forget what happens when people choose ego over transformation. Take Bernier-Madoff, once hailed as a genius investor, he built the largest Ponzi scheme in history, valued at over $65 billion. He had chances to stop, to confess, to shift. But he didn't. His refusal to change not only destroyed thousands of lives, it devoured his own legacy. He died in prison, alone. His name, now a permanent cautionary tale. His empire collapsed because it was built on deception. Yours is rising because it's being built on truth. Galatians 6:9. Encourage-us. Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. You didn't give up. You gave it to God. You surrendered the battle you could have fought and became the vessel through which heaven declared, "Enough." Could it be that you're standing in the middle of the very harvest your ancestors didn't believe was possible? And now, here's what's next. You're not just going to receive favor, you're going to carry spiritual credibility. Your name in the Spirit now has weight, not because you're perfect, but because you're positioned, because God can now entrust you with what others would have mishandled. Psalm 3:8. He promises, He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, the justice of your cause like the noonday sun. No, chosen one. The silence is sacred. The shift is sealed. What heaven saw in secret is about to become visible in due time. You didn't just survive. You activated a divine reversal. You didn't just hold the line. You became the new line. Thank you for taking this journey, not just with me, but with heaven. The construction is done. The foundation is solid. And now, God says, build. There's a kind of silence that doesn't mean absence. It means intention, a holy pause, a divine separation. Not for reaction, but for refinement. What you're feeling right now, this disconnection, this stillness, this season of being set apart, isn't punishment. It's preparation. When God reshapes someone for a calling that is generational, He often begins by removing the noise, like a caterpillar sealed in a cocoon. You are hidden not because you are forgotten, but because transformation requires solitude. No one interrupts the seed beneath the soil because they know something is growing, even if it can't be seen yet. Could it be that your current silence is the soil of your next supernatural bloom? Jesus, before launching into His public ministry, was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, Luke 4:1, not into a crowd, not into a platform, but into a place of isolation, so that He would emerge with power. That same Spirit is guiding your detour. You didn't fall off, you were pulled aside. And now, the question arises, what if your current isolation isn't punishment, but prophecy? What if the withdrawal is not from people but into presence, when God wants to do something through you that has never been done in your family line before? He must first do something within you that has never been experienced. This isn't about disconnection from the world. This is about reconnection with heaven's blueprint. You're not in exile. You're in an encounter, just like Moses at the burning bush, where everything ordinary turned into holy ground. Exodus 3-5. Your current stillness is where God reveals the next instructions. Nature shows us this truth in unexpected ways. Did you know that certain species of Arctic moss only bloom once every 20 years, but when they do, they sustain entire micro-ecosystems? In the same way, your slow season isn't wasted. It's storing power. Your delay has depth. You are not behind. You are being made into a shelter for generations. What if your silence is not weakness, but sacred architecture being formed under pressure? And in this silence, you're not alone. Heaven is speaking, even if softly. The wind doesn't scream at the tree, it shapes it. The moon doesn't compete with the sun, it reflects light on its own schedule. Even in darkness, God is designing. In the 2016 Italian Christian film Fuoco a Mare, Fire at Sea, there's a quiet moment where an old doctor reflects on saving refugees who come across the Mediterranean. He says, to help someone survive, you must sit with them in their pain before you lift them from it. That is what God is doing with you now. He is sitting with you, not rushing your process, not demanding a performance. Just remain until you are ready to rise. This is not the end of your story. This is the sacred, silent in-between, where new frequencies are being tuned, new patterns are being set, and old identities are being stripped away. Do not despise this stillness. God speaks most clearly in the wilderness. He shapes most powerfully in the pause. And now the heavens wait for your next yes. Not the loud kind, the surrendered kind. The quiet agreement that says, even here, I trust you. The kind of yes that Abraham whispered when he left everything familiar, Genesis 12:1. The kind of yes that Mary carried when she said, let it be unto me according to your word, Luke 1:38. This is where legacy begins, not with a shout, but with surrender. In a world that glorifies speed, stillness can feel like failure. But heaven's math doesn't measure momentum the way the world does. What looks like a pause in your life might be heaven adjusting your frequency. When an orchestra is tuning before a grand performance, the silence isn't confusion, it's coordination. That's what's happening to you. You're not off track. You're being recalibrated. In the language of acoustic engineering, there's a concept called resonant frequency. It's the specific vibration at which a system naturally oscillates with the greatest intensity. When the frequency is right, everything aligns, echoes, and harmonizes. If your life has felt disjointed, It's not because you lost your rhythm. It's because God is helping you find the one that was always yours. One that doesn't just echo around you, but through you. This is not stagnation, it's spiritual resonance. In physics, before matter takes on form, it responds to vibration. Sound waves can shift molecules. Energy responds to instruction. Genesis 1-3 didn't start with movement. It started with a voice. And God said, "Let there be light." The voice carried the vibration. The vibration created the shift. The shift formed the world. Could the same thing be happening in your soul right now? You feel unseen not because you're irrelevant, but because you're being etched like a blueprint in architectural design before the first brick is laid. The drafts go through layer upon layer of revision. Load-bearing walls must be calculated. Foundation stress must be measured. If one angle is misjudged, the whole structure risks collapse. That's why God is not rushing your process. He's reinforcing your framework. Psalm 127:1 reminds us, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain." You're not behind. You're being built differently. And when something is being built differently, it demands a different level of patience, precision, and privacy. Take, for example, the story of Zaha Hadid, one of the most visionary architects of our time. She was known for designs that defied traditional logic, often called impossible to construct. For years, critics mocked her, clients avoided her, and many dismissed her because they couldn't comprehend what she was creating. But she kept drafting. She kept drawing what didn't yet exist. Today, her buildings like the Haidar Aliyev Center in Baku are recognized as some of the most advanced architectural forms in the modern world. What was once called unrealistic is now called revolutionary. Why? Because she wasn't building for validation, she was building for the future. Is it possible that your delay isn't denial, but the scaffolding of something the world has never seen before, psychologically? There's something called the plateau effect, a phenomenon where progress seems to flatline, even though growth is still happening beneath the surface. Athletes, musicians, and high-level thinkers all go through this invisible phase. It's not a sign of failure. It's proof of mastery. You're not regressing. You're consolidating the gains that will soon erupt in brilliance. Galatians 6-9 speaks directly to this. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Not if we speed up. Not if we force it. If we do not give up. That's the whisper God is sending to you right now. Don't confuse stillness with stagnation. Don't confuse delay with denial. Don't confuse recalibration with rejection. Because in heaven's architecture, this isn't just about personal breakthroughs. This is generational infrastructure. Your current recalibration is like the tuning of a satellite dish just a few degrees off, and the signal becomes static, but aligned correctly. It connects you to realms beyond imagination. That's what your prayer life is doing. That's what your obedience is shaping. That's what your isolation is reinforcing. Isaiah 40:31 declares, "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles." Waiting is not a weakness. Waiting is wings in disguise. So let the silence settle. Let the recalibration finish. Don't rush what heaven is aligning. Because when you emerge from this, you won't just be ready, you'll be right on divine time. There are moments when obedience looks like weakness to the world. Moments when walking away from the familiar isn't applauded, it's questioned. But what they didn't see is what your yes did in the unseen realm. You didn't just obey a command, you interrupted an entire pattern. a pattern that ran through bloodlines like rivers of silence, fear, avoidance, and pain. Most people inherit dysfunction and call it normal, but something in you paused the cycle. You could have passed it down. You had every reason to become what hurt you, but instead, you chose to become what healed you. The voice they tried to silence in you is now roaring in the spirit realm. Can you feel the shift? Can you sense how heaven is rearranging the atmosphere around your obedience? Even the air around you has changed temperature. This is no small matter, because spiritual cycles don't break because of intention, they break because of action. The Israelites wandered for 40 years, not because God abandoned them, but because they didn't obey the instructions for transition. Numbers 14:33, -34. But you listened. You stayed when it was easier to run. You forgave when bitterness would have been more satisfying. You chose obedience when comfort whispered compromise. In the world of art, Brazilian sculptor and visionary creator Lygia Clark once said, "Art is the only possibility of living," but she didn't just mean paint and clay, she meant expression, truth, divine interruption. Like Clark, who defied artistic norms to birth something raw and holy through abstraction. Your obedience wasn't sterile. It was disruptive. It was alive. It didn't fit the mold, but it remade the mold. And yet, the cost was real. You wept in silence. You were misunderstood. You were labeled too sensitive, too much, too intense. But what if your intensity was actually holy fire? What if your refusal to shrink was never about rebellion, but redemption? Let's not forget what disobedience has cost others. Klaus Zumwinkel, the former CEO of Deutsche Post, was once one of Germany's most respected executives. But beneath the suits and titles was a secret life of massive tax evasion. He had wealth, influence, opportunity, but ignored accountability. The result? Public disgrace, resignation, and a stain on a legacy that could have inspired. Because when obedience is replaced with arrogance, even giants fall hard. By contrast, your surrender has become a foundation. Because obedience to God doesn't just bring reward, it births legacy. Deuteronomy 5:29 echoes God's longing. Oh, that their hearts would be inclined to fear me and keep all my commands always, so that it might go well with them and their children forever. You didn't just obey for you, you obeyed for the generations you'll never meet. For the child in your bloodline, who will one day stand in front of a door you unlocked. Does that sound dramatic? It isn't. It's spiritual architecture, and your obedience was the blueprint. Think back. Who in your family showed you how to break the pattern? Who taught you emotional honesty? Who modeled healthy boundaries? For many, the answer is no one. So the weight fell on you, not because you were punished, but because you were trusted, because you were marked. Joseph had every reason to retaliate when his brothers betrayed him, but he didn't. Genesis 50:20 captures his response. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. His forgiveness wasn't a weakness, it was prophetic wisdom. Like you, he became the exception to a destructive rule. And here's the truth, your obedience is echoing louder than your explanation ever could. You don't need to post about it. You don't need to defend it. You don't need to prove that it was hard. The fruit will prove it. The blessing will carry your fingerprints. Some people won't know how to treat you in this new version of you. Let them feel the distance. You're not the same. The silence they thought was retreat was actually refinement. The pause they mocked was your training ground. Isaiah 30:15 reminds us, "In repentance and rest is your salvation. In quietness and trust is your strength." You didn't just grow, you outgrew the place they thought you'd never leave. And now, the sky has shifted. The terrain is different. The same spiritual storm that would have drowned the old you has no power over you. Because you're not just walking in obedience, you're walking in dominion. You're not just surviving, you're disrupting. And heaven is building something on your obedience that generations will drink from. You didn't just follow the command, you rewrote the consequence. You didn't come this far by accident. You were handpicked by heaven to confront what others ran from, to dismantle what others normalized, and to become what others only dreamed of. Your obedience wasn't just a moment, it was a movement, a holy interruption. And now, everything around you is beginning to respond to that obedience. Atmospheres shifting, doors aligning, people noticing without knowing why. It's not them, it's the spiritual resonance of your yes. Even if they never applaud you, even if they never understand the war you fought in silence, God saw it all. And now, legacy is rising from the very ground where you once wept. You're not rebuilding what broke, you're building what's never existed before. And that chosen one is what changes everything. If this message stirred something deep in your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Presses like to anchor your agreement in the digital realm. Share it with someone you know is quietly fighting to be free. Drop a comment, especially if this describes a part of your journey you've never put into words. Your story might be the permission someone else has been praying for. Whether you've supported this channel through a super thanks or simply through your time, presence, and prayers, thank you. You are part of a prophetic movement that's breaking patterns, not just consuming content. You're not just watching, you're walking in it. May heaven honor your obedience. May peace flood every room you enter. May your name carry divine resonance where it was once rejected. And may you walk boldly in what God is now building through you. This isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your legacy. God bless you. We rise together.